boas-vindas. O nosso seminário prossegue agora com a Conferência de abertura, que nos propõe uma reflexão sobre o investimento em políticas públicas para a primeira infância na Europa. Para isso, temos como convidado Cristiano Morabito, que nos traz uma comunicação intitulada Investing in Childcare for High Social Education and Economic Returns, a European Perspective. Cristiano Morabito, doutorado em Social and Welfare Studies, é um especialista internacional nas áreas das desigualdades intergeracionais e da educação e cuidados na primeira infância. Destaca-se a sua colaboração com as Nações Unidas, o Banco Mundial, a OCDE e várias ONGs internacionais. Recentemente tem trabalhado como consultor sénior para a Foundation for European Progressive Studies e como especialista com um papel-chave na presidência belga da União Europeia e na Comissão Europeia, em questões relacionadas com a desigualdade e políticas para a infância. Thank you.
No, it's okay.
It's
It's there.
okay.
Let me check. No.
Okay.
And I point, I check the light is here, right? If I have to point with the light, it's here. No. Anyway. Okay, thank you so much for inviting me. I thanks especially ProChild Lab for the invitation, University of Lisbon. I'm very honored to be here, but I'm sorry I don't speak Portuguese. Great apologies to you. Okay. I will do it in English. I'm Italian, but I can understand, capture, but it's a bit complicated. So I will give you an overview, a very big overview, of some concept that Isabella already outlined, so about the importance of these policies. But I will try to help you navigate these policies at European level and also see a number of issues that we have in this sector and area that are common at European level. And I will show you also how this issue translate into the Portuguese system. So you will have something to think of what you're doing, basically. So the first concept to outline is this. Human capital in global economy. Okay, I will use global economy, but I will extend the concept to global society. I like it more. So the point is that the globalization, economies and society that are now global, are shaped by knowledge and innovation. These are the two worlds that basically shape what's happening today in terms of the economy, in terms of the society, etc., etc. So the question that we have to raise is, okay, human capital, it becomes the key factors for any country, economy, society, well-being of the individuals, etc., etc. So remember that we are living in a world where at the time, years ago, there was the called manpower, okay? Now we talk about brain power, because everything is more related to brain, to knowledge, to innovation. So you remember when, and therefore you might understand that the competencies, let's call it as such, or skills that shape human capitals are different from before. You remember after the war, the Second World War, we wanted people to be in basic education. So to give basic education to everyone. That was what we wanted. Because at the time, people need basic skills. Like they need to be able to read, to write, to count. So to be included in the economic system, but also emancipate. So they were able to read, they were able to, find a place in the society, especially those at the bottom. they need to have consciousness about the role of the society. So we said that was the human capital was about these basic skills, okay? But here this context changed. The context is much more complex. We are living in a connected world. Before, the world was not connected. So we're living in a world where innovation technologies we know are so fast. It changed very, very fast. Everything changed very fast. So the essence of a human capital cannot be the one that was before. So these basic competencies that we all know, our parents, for instance, you know. So imagine that the World Economic Forum explained that more or less. 65% of children that enter primary education today, they will be employed in jobs that don't exist yet. So imagine if you think of the essence of the human capital as some fixed, basic skills, you're lost. Because these skills maybe in 10 years, 20 years will not be valid anymore. So what is the essence of today human capital? So what is the equivalent of the basic education that after the war was what we needed? Is, of course, what we call the traditional skills remains. Okay, I mean, children and people should be able to read, to write, and to do some counts. Okay, that's clear. But you can add other, let's say, cognitive skills. That might be, for instance, the IT, the capacity to use the technology, basic technology. So this remains. But what is really important and has emerged as being really a key factor for future, let's say, competencies to be able to enter the economy and also the society, emancipate yourself, is non-cognitive skills. What does it mean, non-cognitive skills? It's that everything related to, for instance, the capacity to adapt, the capacity to understand the concept, is the idea of cooperating with the others, understanding the others, and solve problems. Imagine, you have to be able to follow the change. Okay, so able to change yourself. So it's more this capacity that is important and not, a fix. Things like, I know how to count from 1 to 10. So I have to be able myself to change, to follow this pattern, to follow the innovation, to know the world because the world is connected. So it's cultural awareness about what's going on the other side of the world because it impacts me as well. The environmental problems, the communication, capacity to communicate, to cooperate. A lot of the construction of the self today is on social media. We know that. It's on communicating, expressing the communication about ourselves. So all these, let's say, skills and competencies become relevant. So it becomes the essence of the human capital, plus, of course, the traditional one. So that's what's going on. But, the point is that we also know that if at the time, the traditional skills that we need, you can have it in primary education, so you can wait at 6 years old, 7. In some cases, even later. My dad, he could not study when he was very little, so he needed to study later. So you can catch that, this alphabetization type of. Well, this is much more complicated because it starts earlier. So that's what we know from brain development studies, okay? So that's a very famous study. It's quite old, you see, it's 2000, but it's still very valid, actually. So you know that, oh, sorry, I'm moving wrongly, okay. So basically, neurosciences told us that some faculties, for instance, sensory pathways and language, and many of those non-cognitive skills also that we outline is the essence of the human capital today, form, look, before birth even, okay? So when you are in the belly of your mom. And then in the first year of age, because the synapses of the brain are much more developed in this period than not later. So a lot of these, what we said, competencies, skills, let's call it as such, because competence is a very heavy word, but let's call it skills or abilities, okay? that refers to this non-cognitive and therefore the essence of this human capital start to form very early, before primary education, much before. When you're pregnant even, then first year. And then in the first, 1 of 2 to 3 years, the higher cognitive functions continues to develop. So that's the basis. So it happens earlier than before. So if you have to think about a correspondence of what was the basic education after the war, it should be something happening before primary education as we know. So during the early childhood period. The problem is, as you might understand, if this is a sensitive moment when these capacities, abilities develop, it's also a sensitive moment when inequalities develop. So the gaps between children. We know that, gaps are, there are plenty of studies that demonstrate that children from risk situation or from low income, low socioeconomic background develop much less, acquire much less of these abilities that we saw in the early years. There are even studies that outline what happened to the fetus in terms of his development, depending on the risky situation that he has, in the family, in the environment when he's, born and grew up. There are genetics that plays, we know that, we accept that, but we know that most of these gaps are created by the environment when the child is born and grow up. So a poor environment in terms of economic means, especially, this might affect the acquisition of these key skills, so this key human capital stock. Then, of course, we have studies, as I said, that demonstrate that, and there are a lot of studies you find in the global north, in the global south, so you have studies that confirm that a bit around. And I will show you one study later that we did with FEPS, but first I want to show you this. That is a study did in US. It's old, but it's still very valid as well. This is a study that has been done in US and explain you perfectly what's going on. So I explained yesterday to some researcher here, I'm going to explain a bit the wording used here and the categories used because does not, really align with what we have in Europe, but just to let you understand. So welfare parents are those living on social assistance. So they're unemployed, so they receive benefits because they're very poor, okay? Then working class parents are what they call in US blue collar. So those that work, have an employment, but don't gain much, okay? Then college-educated parents are those that gain really a lot. So they earn high salaries because in US, if you have a college degree, you earn a lot. It's here, unfortunately, in Europe, in every country, if you have a university degree, sometimes you don't earn a lot. But in US, it's very dual. So if you have, because also, going to university in US, meaning pay a lot. So when you go out, you have jobs, and high-paid jobs. So let's say that the division is poor families, middle low, and high. So look at the difference. Okay, at 16 months, more or less okay, but look at the gap that start to form immediately. So when the child is 1 year old, and then goes on 2, and at 3, basically, the child from a family in which the parents are poor know 1,000 words, not 100, 1,000 words less than the one living with the high salary parents and highly educated parents. That tells you that the gap, very big gap actually, happens very early. So before school, before primary school, it's age 2, age 1, age 3. Then I show you something else that was very, very impressive when we saw that. So I was working on a study for Save the Children Italy, and we use a test that we have like here, Filippa De Castro, that she is working on it. So she's responsible for this test in Save the Children US. So we use this test, it's called IDELA. And it's a very good test for looking at these abilities of children in early age, because it's not intrusive. Okay, it's a play type of test. And it looks at cognitive, so typical like vocabulary, how many words, counting, how many numbers, etc., etc. Non-cognitive, so for instance, how you feel or you behave if in front of you a peer is crying or this kind of stuff for you. It's for very young children. We did that at age 4, this test. And then there's also the physical. So in this case, one of the, let's say, playing for testing is the capacity to jump with one foot only. So to do like that, okay? You have one, and how many jumps you're able to do. So, and even in that, you have difference in social economic status. So the red one are the children in high social economic status family, and the blue in low social economic status family. So the children that are not able to do any jump, so the percentage is of course higher for those in low social economic status. Then if you look at the capacity to do 1 to 5, it inverts, of course, it inverted. And the distance is big then, it started to become big, for doing more than 5, so 6 to 10 jumps, okay? So the kids from high socioeconomic families, the percentage of those able to do more jumps, it's much higher. So it's even impact on the physical development. But that's we know, because also we have this physical development is also very related to what happened in the fetus, you know, and that's, we know that there's so the child, of course, has no responsibility for that, okay? And neither the parents, because, I mean, we are talking about parents that they struggle economically, so it's, you cannot put a finger and say it's your fault. I mean, you don't have enough. Parents that, for instance, have to work a lot to earn something. He has even little time to dedicate to the child. And of course, maybe if he's a lower educated, doesn't even know much, how spend like 30 minutes of high quality time to transmit something to the kids. So those that comes from families with highly educated parents and of course high resources, so they can buy also more resources, are advantaged. So that's a sensible time for developing that's human capital, skills, abilities for the 21st century, but unfortunately, because of that, is also the sensible time when inequalities start to form like that, okay? And it accumulates. So when you reach primary education, the gap, it's already there. And it's complicated then. If you keep the gap, it's complicated too. So now the point is, okay, but what do we do? And this is very interesting because we also have studies that tells you that I want you to focus on the word high quality, high quality. So that participation in high quality, early childhood care and education, which means creches, here to translate to Portuguese system, creches and preschool, 0-6, have an effect on reducing these gaps. So it's particularly beneficial if it's high quality for everybody, but if it's quality there, at least it's beneficial for the children in low socioeconomic status. So this can help reducing this gap, if it's well done, of course. And we have, again, a lot of studies from US, a lot, longitudinal. Isabel was mentioning Ekman. I will show you something about Ekman, but Ekman studied. There's at least 2 or 3 longitudinal studies that they did in US, like 50, 60-year studies. So they follow the children when they were very, very young, like 1 year old, and they look what happened. So some, in this case, enter a preschool, and so they see the differences in the pattern. So they see the effects of it. But we have also studies in Europe. OECD did this study, for instance. It looked at what's going on in the cognitive skills, so reading and mathematics. I show you the result of a study we did in FEPS with PISA test result. So they see that 54 points higher in PISA tests for the low socioeconomic children if they attend quality intensive early childhood care and education. So it can help. And of course, we have a lot of other evidence in terms of the effects, positive effects on school dropout, because you know that dropout and early leaving is related to social economic status as well. So the children in low social economic status are more tendency to be more, facing early school leaving. Then you have also about the likelihood to continue education, to secondary and to tertiary education, and therefore earnings, higher earnings, also better vocational skills if they decided to go to better vocational skills, if they did a very good quality. So the effects are very long, because imagine it's like after 10, 12 years, okay? The impact of having a good, high quality early childhood care education, especially for the low-income children that we see, they have already the gap. And what they found also, a lot of studies, especially in US, look at the positive effect on psychophysical development and health. For instance, reduction of antisocial behaviors. That's something that is quite known as an effect. So I show you this because I was mentioning that OECD PISA did a study. So we did with FEPS a study on all European children. So we took all European member states, so including Portuguese. It's 15 years of children, I mean, adolescents, let's call it that, because the PISA test, I don't know if you know that, is a educational test, is done of 15 years old children, young adolescents. And it's mathematics and reading. So the blue is reading, the red is mathematics. So what we observe is that the children living in low socioeconomic family, only 30% of that, so 1 out of 10, have the same level of mathematics and reading at 15 years old, of course, of the rest, the average. Okay? So only 30% reach the average. So everyone else, so almost 90%, 80%, is below the average. So the correlation between low results at test and being in a low social economic family is very high. So we say, okay, let's have a look at what's going on if a child from a low social economic family goes to the quality intensive, actually went, because we tested 15 years old. So there's a question in PISA asked to parents, did your child went to the child care center or the preschool center, and what was intense, et cetera, et cetera. So at what age attended? So we have this information, we can see the past. And what happened is really revealing, because this is the probability of a child from a low socioeconomic family to reach the same level of anyone else on mathematics and reading, which is not the case. So you're talking about the probability that happens after 12 years, because it was, in some cases, they went off 1 year of age, and we are monitoring what happened at 15 years, so 14 years before, okay? So the effects is very long in time, and we saw that, look at what happened. So probability, 60.5% probability is very high, statistically speaking, especially when you consider that long time happened, okay? If you go at the age below 1, in both reading and, well, it's better in reading, blue, than mathematics, then it's high if the child was at age 2 in a center, it could be in this case a creche, then still high at 3, then decrease but still high at 4 when he's in preschool, but then when he's 5 years old, so that if the child enter a center when he was 5, it starts to be late because the probability is none. And if it doesn't do anything, so that's more for a country where, of course, you have issues in access of also preschool education, especially for low-income children. And we know that in Portugal, for age 3, 4, you have issues, so it could be. But if so they don't enter and they go straight to the primary education, that becomes negative. So it means that the probability becomes negative. So you have less probability as a child from a low socioeconomic family at 15 years old than when you're more, adult, let's call adolescents, to reach the same level of mathematics as the others. So the power of the intensive exposure of early education at 1, 2, 3, and 4, it's really high. Then if you go later, so the result is going that to thinking of reducing this gap only for through primary education doesn't work. It's too late. So that's too late. So it's negative. It's even the opposite. So you have to start much earlier because you know that this might work. Okay? So, and this is individual. So here we are talking about individuals. So I am a child from a low socioeconomic family. I can benefit from it. But be careful because, as I said, there's been studies demonstrating what's going on at societal level. So what the impact overall for the society, because one could say, okay, I don't care. I'm not from a poor family, it's their problem, okay? So that's what happened, unfortunately, very often. So the research, of course, in order to convince policy making, had to look what's going on to the society. So they can convince, especially a Ministry of Finance. It's always, okay, well, what's my return if I put money on it? And so they have actually demonstrated a lot of studies the societal and economic return of it. So you have, I give you just an overview of the macro effect demonstrated. So not on individual, but on society in general, okay? So you have the longer permanence in education, which means high skills, which means high stocks of human capital for your country, which means higher productivity, okay? And that's lead to growth. There is really, actually, there was a study of OECD that looked at the effects on growth, economic growth, of investing in preschool and childcare. Of course, there's an issue of employment for women, because, we know that the first to be sacrificed, if there's no service for children, especially younger children, is women. So women employment. But women employment, which also means less growth, also means less earnings for the families, higher inequalities, and of course disparities, the gender disparity, cultural disparity as well, okay? So you have the antisocial behavior issue. That's a typical thing that they look in US, because in US, it's not like here in Europe, in which welfare state is valued. So in US, as you know, unfortunately, it's not much valued. So they see like health as a expenditure only. So they have to demonstrate that, for instance, if you act on that, you reduce antisocial behavior, and therefore you spend less on welfare later. And they demonstrated that. For us, maybe it's less relevant in terms of, but it's still relevant, okay? Because an economic minister or finance minister always reason in this way. So what the return? And so you have on employment, on productivity, on growth, a lot of studies that demonstrate you the larger impact on society and on the economy. The economic returns are very interesting because, as I said, you are a researcher. You could be one day policymaker, I hope. No, maybe I don't for you. But you will need to go to get money, okay? For that, that's clear, always. So you need to demonstrate that if I invest something, I get something in return. And actually, there's a lot of studies on that. And one, of course, the famous one I'm going to show you, it's Ekman, the Nobel Prize, Isabel outlined. And that was actually a lot of people, research people in this field, were a bit uncomfortable when Ekman came into the picture because, Educationalist, psychologist, economist, there's a strange relations, let's call it as such, in the three type of. And so when the Nobel Prize came, so, we are like putting this on an economy, but it was very useful because, of course, imagine if the Nobel Prize of Economy start to say, hey, we have to invest on that, then the Minister of Finance start to listen, okay? And they say, okay, then we can push for something thanks to that. And actually it's been used and a bit misused, the Ekman, but still, it was important. So OECD, for instance, start to look at it, and as I told you, they basically take OECD country, all OECD country, and they estimate what's going on if each and every one of the OECD country push coverage of preschool education on the highest level that you can find in OECD, which is 99, more or less, 98, 99%. That will increase in the long term, but not that long. That's very important. I will show you the last slide that I will show you. You will see that GDP per capita on more than 2%, which is big. It's big. Okay. They do work on US because they say US is a very peculiar situation. So whatever you want to do on social, you have to demonstrate that there's an economic impact. So they look and they see that a very limited increase in public spending for early childhood care education, 0.3, which is very limited actually, can increase long-term income per capita of 3.6. So it's, it's more. So you spend, but you get more, 0.06 more. There was another very good study of OECD. You will find at the end, all this study, you will find at the end in my reference presentation, so you can check. That basically outlined that if you invest early in education, that is a good investment for the education sector too, because you release pressure for education later. For instance, on remedial education, okay? Or depends, vocational, we can work better. So you have less pressure after for the education spending. And of course, now I have to show you Ekman, we must. So Ekman calculates actually the return. So if I put $1 of investments for the child to go into early childhood care education setting, how much do I get in return? And he calculated the return is huge. It's $8. So imagine if you have money, okay, you want to invest in a bank. You put €1 and you get 6. It's a very good investment, okay? So that's a very good argument that has been used for, of course, the finance ministers. And that's the famous Ekman curve that has been used widely, to demonstrate that show you basically what's going on in terms of the return, the return on investment, so what's going on for a country that put money, and you will see that the return is much higher if you put the money before. So in preschool, and in this case, early childhood education, so 0.6, okay? And it's less than if you put on schooling, and it becomes less than if you put on post-schooling. So the idea is, of course, that does not mean that you have to defund primary education or you have to defund remedial, because it doesn't mean it does not work, okay? It means that the return is higher. So it's better if you put money earlier for your accounts, basically. So it's much better to put earlier. There's better effects and better also effects in terms of your return. So that was very useful, because then, imagine the people that were working on early childhood care education, always a bit ignored, by policymakers. So they came with the Ekman. And then they started, being, strongly supported because of that. And also their research started to be, a bit, heard and listened better. That was we got. And in fact, I was explaining yesterday, because I follow all the story, and I saw what happened European Union level. So now we go to real policies, okay? So European Union, we had in 2013, at the time, there was a recommendation that was actually well done and still very valid, this recommendation, made by the European Commission to member states. they was calling investing in children, breaking the cycle of disadvantage. So it was very good and visionary because it was including all the arguments that I just mentioned to you, okay? So the fact that skills, abilities start to form very early, and then inequalities start to form very early, so you have to invest in this policy to break the intergenerational transmission of disadvantage and inequality, which is very unfair, because, I mean, a child has no responsibility for that, and of course, this unfairness is going to create discontent in the future, so it's very, very well done. But it's from, now it's 10 years ago, okay? And didn't happen much. So there was that push, and it was a push created also by this Ekman movement, no? It was using Ekman. So they were able to convince the Commission that, as you know, the European Commission is not really, it's a bit conservative as in sense of policies, you know, so they don't go much on new things, which actually is not new, but anyway. So that was something, but then after, you know, see that in 2019, so later, there was a recommendation, a council on high quality system. So once the Commission said, okay, that's a very important policy, so we have to work. There was somebody in Commission who said, yeah, but we have to tell member states how to work because it's not that evident, okay? And so they did this quality framework that is very interesting because it's not much a framework about quality of the service. It's about the quality of the system. So how a system you can consider is a quality system. A system that access children, all children from high, low socioeconomic, that is well monitored, that has a curriculum, etc., etc., etc. But what happened really that makes the big difference was COVID. So in COVID, basically, people, policymakers, start to realize what does it mean to have a child at home and work at the same time, okay? So they feel what especially women feel when they got pregnant and they got a child and they cannot work. And they feel also what means for families to not be able to work in this situation. So it was a kind of click. And also they say, well, of course, it was labor-oriented. So they say, if this sector collapses because of COVID and because you have a lot of non-public that, of course, in the US collapsed entirely. So the 03, there was Biden administration put, I don't know how many billions to keep it afloat because it was collapsing because it's private. So no customer, no money, dead, okay? And he said, if the system collapses, people will not be able to come back to work. So how do we recover from COVID crisis and economic crisis? So that's a crucial sector. So, and then, of course, they start to go around and look at, you know, evidence, and thanks God we did evidence in the past. So it's, okay, so Heckman, and then there's other things. Okay, that's good. Okay, let's focus on that. And it's incredible, I was explaining yesterday, that we move from ignorance, more or less, to, that's a very important policy, we have to do it, okay? And so, first, child guarantee. So the child guarantee, I don't know if you know about it, it's a bit, you know, bubble thing. The child guarantee is basically an initiative that actually was approved at the Porto Summit with the Portuguese presidency at the time, that asked European country, to make plans, and of course with, you know, indicators, how do you fund that, to ensure access for all children, but particularly for very vulnerable children, which are children with disability, children with low-income family, poor family, or a very, you know, disadvantaged situation, or migrant backgrounds, or alternative care, etc., etc. Access to 5 rights is education, which means basically schooling, nutrition, health, housing, and early childhood care and education, the 5th one, okay? So he asked countries to do it. And I have to say that the Portuguese plan is the best around. I know, not because it's in front of you. So if I go to Finland, I don't going to say the same because, for instance, the Finland one is very bad. So you have Portuguese is the best, and Italian and Spain good. but there's a reason for Italy and Spain to be good, is because, and this other one that you will see, is receive a lot of funds from Recovery and Resilience Facility, so they must report well, okay? So, and that's why, but it's you know, the Portugal as a unit with people working on that, on the child guarantee. So it's a very serious stuff what they did here, to plan properly how to, you know, do policies, and especially in this field, that reach out the most vulnerable children. 2021 Recovery and Resilience Facility was crucial, because when the European Union decided to basically mutualize their debt, so, and to put money for countries to recover, amongst the policies for next, they call Next Generation EU, and it's actually the name of the Recovery and Resilience Facility, they said, invest in early childhood care and education. Okay? That's very important for recovery. And so countries, of course, are pushed to do it. So Portugal invests to create 12,000 more places. Italy invests to create 250,000 more places. But you will see why, because it's very low in coverage. Spain also. So you have Germany use it to create 90,000 new places in childcare, because in Germany you have, it's very unusual to think about it, the poorest part, which is the East Germany, there's a lot of childcare, because that was the ex-Eastern Germany, DDR. They were like, you know, investing in childcare a lot. And the West, it's very low, that are richer. So they try to rebalance between the richest that are less and the poorest that have more. So that's the idea. But that was very important, because that pushed countries to say, okay, we can invest without thinking much about the debt, because the RFF funds does not enter into calculation of debt. So you can spend, basically. 2022, then there was another, so see, from 2003, then like, tack, 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 you know, how they start to push for it. So they put it in the pillar of social right, which is basically the framework that governs the social policy in Europe, and they say one indicator should be on preschool education and childcare. And we give you also targets. So we ask countries to raise participation on childcare, 0-3, 45%, and preschool and 96%. And also reduce inequality in access, and also ensure quality. That was what they asked, okay? And in 2024, now, that was La Hulpe declaration, which is, there was the social summit of the Belgian president. I was the rapporteur for that, that asked countries to do that, but also to professionalize the people, to strengthen the system in a way, like, for instance, to strengthen, and you will see why, the financial system, so how the transfer from the governments to, you know, providers of local authorities are made, because that creates a lot of problems in the way that it is right now. So strengthen public services, and also to empower the local level to do this policy, because local meaning like cities have powers in this policy. So you have to consolidate them, okay? So there was, and of course using better indicator, this kind of stuff. So that's a program for the next commission. Childcare in particular will be for 0-3, which is much more underdeveloped, will be one of the main issues to be done for the next cycle at the European level. Okay, so we pass from ignorance to, yeah, we have to do it. But of course, with this push, we still have problems. So what are the problems at European level, and what are the problems in Portugal? They're always very similar. You will see. You have very common problem at European level. So the first problem, that's 0-3, because in general preschool is better. So I focus on that. So that's participation, okay? So we said 45% should be the targets, but look at how many reach 45, couple of. Portugal is one of them, but there's a problem for that. You will see later. So most of them are below, and actually most of them are below 33%. It was an old target. So they didn't even reach the target that they were supposed to reach in 2010. So Slovakia has 2% coverage, 2%, meaning 2 children out of 100 can have access to childcare, which is very, very, very low, okay? The good thing about Portugal, if you noticed, is that access is for services of 30 hours or more so intense. Why is it, look at Netherlands instead, that most of the service are for below 30 hours. That's important for reconciliation, because that, you know, if you have less, if the intensity of the program is very low, so you do few hours of that, that's become a problem for parents to manage the reconciliation, okay? So that's something that you also have to put in the balance. So, okay, so it seems that Portugal is fine, but you will see that is not entirely what's happening. So you always have to look deeper in the data to see what's going on. So the point is that you have participation that in many countries is lacking, first problem. Second problem is that participation for low socioeconomic children is lower. So that's all Europe, okay? We put all Europe. That was for a Belgian presidency. We did this little easy exercise. So we look what happened. The red line is the children in the first quintile, so the lowest economic quintile. The blue is the highest. So access, it's very different, okay? For the red and the blue, very big gap. And look what happened. The gap increased after COVID. And why that? Because in many countries, there's a prevalence of private provision. So of course, private provision in COVID collapsed in many areas. So what type of child was losing for that? Of course, the child that doesn't have a mean, because in affluent areas, for instance, when you have parents that can pay after COVID and can therefore maintain, so let's say that the services are richer, okay? When COVID happens, and after COVID, they could stay there, so they could go. And then what collapsed was the bottom, and that's why the gap widened after COVID. So the problem is that, first problem, we said that this is a sensitive time, okay? So this is the backbone of the education system. This is where the human capital starts to form. It's the equivalence of the basic education after the war, but few children still able to participate in many countries. And poorer children, we should look more for them, because they are the one that have gaps already. We saw, no? When they're little, they have access less. So what happens today? We are increasing inequalities. That's what's happening. So a system that was supposed to, if you look at the idea of basic education after the war, was equalize chances to everybody, okay? This system is creating a lot of inequalities. So we are widening the gaps amongst children, not closing with that. So that's a big problem first we have. But why it is the case? The first that I said is private. So, I want to show you that later, but in countries like Italy or Spain, 50% of services, 0-3, are private. So it means that private means totally private, okay? So it means that children from low social economic family cannot enter. They don't have the money to pay, because it's like a free fees. I can ask you 600 euros. That's okay, okay? Even in case there are the system like Ireland, like UK, that are market-based. So everything is in the market. So this is private. But I give you tax discounts. But does not work, because if I'm poor, I don't able to pay anyway. So I cannot wait for my tax discount. I cannot pay now. So that's what happens. But in some cases, you have the cost of childcare that account for 20-30% of the family income, which is unaffordable, okay, for many. That's what happens. So, and this creates, that's more in detail, that's OECD data, this creates, that's for 0-2, that is what creates, that was old, but they didn't do it updated, that's what creates problem. So the first tier side, the blue one are the poorest children, let's say, yeah? The other one, the third side, are the highest, and the middle is the second. So in all countries, you have inequalities in access. And this because of private sector, and another reason that I will tell you now. Portugal is funny because, as you can see, there, the problem is the middle that have less access. Why? Because until now, you had a system that paid for the poorest. You see, the lowest to poorest, Portugal paid, so they have more access. The rich have access because they pay. So the middle was the problem in Portugal. So the middle, they have less access for that, okay? And so that's the situation. But you will see in many countries, you have also in countries that you don't suspect, like Sweden, in general you don't suspect. But Sweden, it was a country that in the 70s put the right to early childhood care education in the constitution. But after that, you start to privatize a bit. And that's what creates the boom, so that they increase the inequalities that were maybe non-existent at the time in the 70s for that. Huh? So you have this kind of patterns. So that's the first thing. So you have private provision. And also the methods that they use, you know, to do discount taxes, that doesn't work. Look at France, it's very interesting. France in general, you say, oh, it's an egalitarian country, they put a lot of money. It's true. Private is not that much. But for France, there's another problem that I show you now, because that includes also Portugal. So the second problem why kids from lower socioeconomic status don't enter service is because the territorial distribution penalizes them. So the service are more in areas where affluent family lives. Italy is an amazing case. First there's Brussels. So that's something that I did for the presidency. It was very funny because I take Brussels, the metropolitan area of Brussels, and I look at the average income of the municipalities. In Brussels is a metropolitan, so you have different municipalities. What you see Brussels in green is the city center. Okay, the rest is. And then I look at the coverage of subsidized childcare. So the one that is subsidized by the, like here, that you have subsidized childcare for NGOs, similar, okay? So it's accessible. But you will find, you know, apart from the red and green, you will find this bizarre correlation in which basically the municipalities that are richer have also more availability of accessible place for children. So it should be inverted. So a poorer municipality should have more places accessible for children so the poorer children can enter, okay? Here is the richest. So apart from some, because San Jose is the poorest municipality in Brussels, but the mayor is really active, so he spends a lot on services. That's why it's, you know. While the red one are the richest, and the mayors believe that this is a private thing, so they go to private, and that's what happens, okay? But, I mean, that's really incredible. So what happens here? It's happened something really simple, if you want. You always have this configuration, okay? If you go to Portugal, I look one of the data, you will see that the area where the poorer children live, suburban area of Porto, Lisbon, Setúbal, have less services, much less services than other areas in the country or the center of the city, much less. And that creates the fact that poorer children have less access. And this is why, because this area have less resources. So you cannot ask parents to pay because they don't have money, okay? The municipality have less resources from taxes, so they cannot help the services. So if I am an NGO, I mean, imagine the case of Portugal, okay? If I am an NGO, they have to open his center or go. Will go to the area? Of course not, because they're going to lose money at the end of the year, even with the government contribution, because the government contribution from Social Security does not cover all the child cost. So where do I find the money for the rest? I cannot ask the parents. I cannot ask donation. The community does not have money. I cannot ask the municipality that does not have money for maintenance costs to these kind of things, okay? So it's hard for me to decide to go there in this very poor area and open a service. And therefore I don't go. That's what happened. That's a case of Portugal. But in the case of other countries in Europe, there's another problem is, okay, Italy is similar. Italy is regional. Poorer region, very, very, very low coverage for the same reason. And why? Because it's a matter of spending. So first, how much money you put, and second, how you distribute your money. So how much money you put counts. I want to forget the rest, look at Portugal, okay? So Portugal is down there. That's an old, I think it's 2009, it increased, okay? But still, the public spending is not much for early childhood care and education. So you have high coverage, okay? 45%, but low spending. So what does it mean? You will see the reply later why it is the case. So what happens to Portugal then? One reason is that you don't pay, the spending does not cover the entire cost of the child. So that's why it's low. But there's another reason, and the last reason that I show you. So first, spending. You have to put money, period. Secondly, you have to distribute well the money. Sorry, I'm doing wrong. Yeah, that's something that we calculate for OECD. It's complicated stuff. I'm going to explain you very briefly. So it's the difference. The blue dot is basically what is the real spending of the services of childcare. The red is what the municipality puts, the local authority puts, okay? The difference is what the states give you. So more difference, more contribution and transfer from the state. On all the country, apart from a couple of, France is one of them, but there is another problem, you will see that the contribution of the transfer of the state is very little. So it means that most of the costs are bared by local authorities. In this case, since you don't have local authorities transmitting, most of the cost is bared by the NGOs providers, okay? Because the transfer are not enough. That's what happened everywhere. In these conditions, no one wants to go to a poor area. No one. And then you create this trilemma. Dilemma, trilemma. So the first dilemma is, do I open a childcare center? No. Okay, if I am a municipality in a poor area, I have no money to do that. It's impossible. If I am a provider, NGO, idem, I can't, okay? Then, okay, imagine that I put an effort because I receive contributions. There's the RFF from the European Union, and it's going to give me money to open that. As I have another dilemma here. Say, what do I do? Either I ensure for every child to get into the service, or I do quality. I cannot do both. I don't have money for doing both, okay? So I have to take money from somewhere. If I decide that every child enter, it means that I have very little contribution from parents. I have to reduce quality. So I have to pay less the people, I have to take less people to work, etc. If I do that, I need parents pay. So the kids, poorer kids are out, okay? So if I'm a municipality or a provider like here, I have to face this trilemma all the time. And that creates the barriers very often to get the children, poor children, into the service because they don't find it, because in this territory you don't go, okay? Or they don't find it because they don't open anyway. Or the other problem is, okay, maybe I find, but the quality is low. I mean, the whole service of Portugal, as you see, some poorer children could enter. But why then the spending was so low? It's because you sacrifice quality. The quality of the service in Portugal are very low. So now I'm going to be the bad one. So I give you compliments, and now it's going to come. But it's, I have to say it's a fair choice. Flanders in Belgium, which is a rich region, almost the richest in Europe, they decided to do the same. They say, guys, first thing first, I want to put kids there. So I'm going to open it, okay? And with the money I have, I try to get them because it's fundamental for family, but quality is low. And so now I start to work on quality. I have to, because if not, that I can ensure that women work fine, or the father works, but the effects on children are known because there's no quality. So it's, all things you see, human capital, skills, benefits for that, no. Then I have to work on that. So Flanders are doing exactly the same thing as you're doing right now. So, okay, we need to work on quality. So they did exactly the same. They did a curriculum now. That's the first step for ensuring quality. And what are the steps to ensuring quality? And I conclude now. What is quality? Okay, quality is structural. So you have structural aspects. It could be like the meter square of a room, the toys or things that you put in the room, the training, if they're trained or not, your personnel, how many educators per child, that's all, you know, structural aspect. You can measure actually structure. But the most important part is process quality, which means what do I do with children, okay, when I am there? What do I do? So it is about what type of learning or what type of development of the child I want to promote. So quality, I mean, that's my opinion. It has a lot to do with inclusion. So you have to set up an education experience that's inclusive for everyone. Okay? So every type of child. A child that is trauma, a child that is poor, a child that is rich, a child that is come from abroad, everyone. If you want to get the results that we want, close the gap, give experience to everybody. So you have a society that includes everybody and everybody push for the society, okay? It has to be inclusive. Inclusive, what does it mean? For instance, in a very simple term, it means that you don't expect that different children reach a specific standard of learning at the same time. So you don't expect that 5 children in front of you at the 6 months after we started, everyone should know from A to D, from 1 to 12, and doing this. That's not possible, okay? So you recognize that every child is different in his own needs, and you have to meet the child where it is. So you have to have projects of learning that are able, and there are techniques for that, to get the child, every child at the end where he has to be, but at his own pace, his own rhythm. And for that, it's something, you know, you don't use the sequential type of learning in which I put all the children on the chairs, I explain, did you understand? No, do you understand? No, you're stupid, okay? Or something like that. It's an exaggeration, but you get the point. So I try to get project work together in which they can do different competencies at the same time. And so, and everyone find his own places in this learning pattern. And these are practices that you have to do. Has a lot to do with relation with parents, because you have to be able to transmit that at home, especially for poor children, that we know they don't have resources at home. So you have to try to transmit to parents that, so they keep it at home and they continue to. Learning environments are crucial, because if you want to organize a learning in this way, your environment should be set in a way that help that, let's say, cooperative and project-based work. So rather than chairs and something like that, you have to conceive your space differently. You have to use material different. You can use recycled material. You can use the space you have. You can use the plants that are in your garden. You can use everything for doing this, okay? And it costs sometimes less. They're not doing typical quality that is like with the typical standard material that you buy. And of course, that means that professionals should be trained in another way. It does not mean that it should cost more to train. It means that there's another type of training. So the ability to recognize the needs of every child, follow the child, and able to meet the child where it is, do project work that is able to include everybody at his own pace, multiple competencies at the same time, not that, okay, now I study you mathematics, and then just that, or something like that. And of course, that's require also rights of workers. That's something that we put in the ULP declaration, okay? Because unfortunately, these workers have little rights. Salaries. These workers are very bad salaries. So the point that I said to the European Commission is that you can't go to countries and say, this is the most important policy you have to do. It's fundamental because the children are the most important moment of his life, and then you pay 500 euros the workers. I mean, there's no logic in that. So if you have this role, I cannot treat you like, you know, I have to give you good salaries. I have to recognize a charter of rights for these people. They have a fundamental role in the society with established, you know, rights, etc., etc. That's cost. So that's the problem. Low spending, you can't do that. So you have to choose. for that. And that's, so I said, a matter of choice. Last two slides and I'm over because I was too long. So that's something that I want to show you. That's a study that Eurofund did that showed that opportunity for training for preschool educators are much lower than for other, education support activities or primary education. So the percentage of those that have opportunities is lower. So they have lower opportunity for training. They have lower recognition. If you do a public call for an institutions to manage as a municipality, to manage your, I mean, that's not the case of Portugal because it's not the same system, but in every country, to manage your childcare center, so you ask others to manage for you, in the public contract, there's no mention of the heaviness of the work of these people. If I ask a company to build a building for me as a municipality, I have to choose the company that in the clause put a mention of the fact that it's not going to ask a worker to heavy weight for 10 hours, that's not possible. It's against the law. There's no law that tells you that you must create service in which a person does not take the weight of the child, his kilos, for 10 hours straight. There's nothing for that. So there's zero recognition. Huh? So you have to do that. And then, of course, they say it costs money. Fine. But look at what we found. This is a study that we did for the European Commission. It's very complicated. I'm going to explain you just what does it mean. So Portugal is there, okay? So you have, that's the, it was old, it's much higher, it's a bit higher, the coverage. So that's the coverage of under 3, okay? So that's, what does it mean in terms of reaching 50% of coverage in all these countries? So if government of Portugal put the money to reach 50% and also put other money to, increase quality and stuff like that, of course, you say, then I have to go to Brussels, and the guy in Brussels says, oh, you're spending too much, you have to return. You know how does it work? No, you have to make adjustment, fiscal adjustment after that. Well, the point is, I want to show in the last column. So the point is, if Portugal put this money on the sector, for the new rules that have been approved at European level, in the 7 years cumulated, so the fiscal needs, so what it needs to put, to cut eventually, or, to put to return fiscally, it's negative. What does it mean? That they have to put less money after that. So the European Commission, if you present that, you're going to say, okay, I spend 100, I have to, at the end, not put 100. I have to put less on other sectors too. So it's more convenient to put money than don't put money. That's, something that is really, because the effects on GDP, it's super high, okay, for all countries. So, and of course, because Portugal is negative because it's very high coverage. So you push a bit more, you have good effects, and you need to pay back to be fiscally adjust less. In some cases, it's 0, which is very good, so I don't need to do it. In the case of Portugal, it's even less. So you're going to pay less. So, okay, cost, but you have return, and therefore you pay less in fiscal adjustment later. So just to give you the last word, because I want to close with, you see, you have to be possible. You have to put in your head it's possible. So you have all conditions that make sure that you can do it. So you can have a system by adjusting things that serve also the poor children and that ensure quality. So everything is possible. And to demonstrate everything is possible, that's a picture of a little classroom that was in 1948, I think. In the city of Reggio Emilia, that some of you maybe knows, in a city of Italy, that's the best system in the world, okay, of early childhood. And it's been done by the citizen of the city, this system, okay? So there was no state helping. Actually, the state was against. So, because the state, after 45 in Italy, although it was a democracy, the education system was still the fascist education system. So they didn't want that. So what happened is that there was a place in which the citizens fought a lot against the Germans, the Nazi. Huh? And they were able to capture a truck. And they sold the pieces, so they got money. It was a village close to Reggio Emilia city. Now it's part of the city, okay? A very poor village, actually. Reggio Emilia at the time was very poor. Now it's rich, but it was very poor. And you have women working in the fields, okay? It was an agricultural place. So they said, okay, what do we do with this money? Now we have some money because we stole to Germans, and we have to sell it. What do we do with this money, okay? And then, of course, there was the man that said, oh, we want to have the gym. We build the gym with the money. And the women said, no. We build a childcare. And because they said, look, guys, I'm going to be straight here. I've been, half of the resistance is me, women. Okay, we were able to get the weapons and kick the Germans out. So now you can't ask me, to go back to my house, not working, and take care of the kids. So I want the childcare, okay? Fight, of course, the women won. So that's, and the women won, and actually because they said, look, you know what happens here? We're working in the field, and in order to keep the children, two should stay home, and the others will go to work in the field. And the day after, the other two stay home, and the others can work. That cannot happen. We want to have a serious stuff here, and we want to have it now. And they won. So that's demonstrated that women are always clever, in general, okay? But in particular, means that everything is possible, because from that experience, others in the city start to do it. So other cities start to do it. So from 45 to 60 and to 70 and to now, today, that is the best system in the world. You have all the children in the creche and preschool, free, high quality, demonstrated high quality. I mean, Ekman wanted to enter in the board, and they say, no. Say, we don't need you. and actually stayed a bit, and then they kick him out. But it was like, and that's been created by the citizen with 0 penny from the state, because the state was against, okay? So they self-finance that alone, thanks to the fights of the women in particular. But that's if you think about it, retrospectively, it's impossible. It's a countryside place, okay? It's like, it's not Lisboa, it's not Rome, it's not Bologna, it's a very countryside place. So how can they do that, Starting from 0 to become the best example of this policy in the world. You go there, you got full of people from all around the world visiting and try to understand what they do and learn, etc., etc. You talk to the people that work in this service. They are very funny because they're typical countryside people in Italy, so it's very cool to talk to them. But that means that it's possible, that nothing is impossible. So if you have good arguments, if you have women leading, maybe, that's possible. So I think it's possible also in Portugal. That's my positive end. Thanks.
Thank you, Christian, for enthusiastic words and reflections. Temos uma questão. Deixem-me só, por favor, colocar aqui. Nós, ao longo das sessões e das várias intervenções, iremos ter, no fim, um código, portanto, que vão poder passar. Deixem-me só abrir. Está aqui. Pois está, claro, com certeza. Muito bem. Pronto, temos ali no canto superior direito um código, portanto, que irá remeter para a plataforma Menti, e nessa plataforma, portanto, poderão introduzir as vossas questões. Portanto, tendo em conta a hora, vamos conseguir realizar uma questão, mas, por favor, coloquem à vontade todas as questões que tenham, porque depois também teremos todo o gosto em partilhar, e depois também, após o término deste momento, também poderão partilhar com o Christian. Portanto, é só basicamente abrir para a plataforma, colocar a questão, nós iremos receber, e a Silvana irá partilhar com o Christian, então, essa questão, e depois pedimos, por breves palavras, que o Christian irá partilhar, portanto, a sua visão e a sua resposta.
Christian?
Yes.
We have a question.
Yeah.
Despite the good coverage in terms of early childhood centers,
Mm-hmm.
we know that inequalities persist. How could we overcome these inequalities?
That's a good question, because we talked to a lot of people in these days, and we have probably find a solution. So we have a solution already. The problem that you have with that, as I said, it's okay with the new system of gratuity. So that basically every child can enter the services. In theory, I mean on paper, you should have access to everyone. But it doesn't happen because, as I said, areas in Portugal where communities are poorer don't have services because you're not incentivized to go there. One reason is because, as I said, Social Security does not cover with the contribution the entire cost of the child. So you have to find somewhere else. The second reason is that, and is connected, of course, the child does not cost the same in every part of the country. I was talking with somebody yesterday this year, very interesting. You have to always talk to people working because they know what they're talking about. If you work as they do with children from low socioeconomic status, the cost of the child is higher because they have, for instance, to employ the psychologist and social protection, or let's call it social security expert, okay? That's 2 people more because you need it. I mean, there's children facing very, very hard situation, okay? It's a matter of also food. I mean, in some creches, sometimes, I mean, the parents give some food or something like that. That's not happen. So you have to fully feed the child because maybe is, in some cases, extreme, the only food they get. So these cost more, okay? Other point, in some cases, you have very, very extreme situation in which you find hardly people that wants to work there with that salary. I mean, you can find maybe youth that they are like wanted to because they're young, but they cannot do that for 30, 40 years. So it's a matter of establishing the real cost of the child in different areas, differentiate the contribution, because you must, and try to give incentive to people to go there. So give more if you go to poorer area. So it does not mean that you don't give to others, because that don't work, you know, because the others say, no, it's my tax, I want to have the same. Okay, but to establish the real cost, because we are not talking about real cost here, we are giving the same to everybody. So you have to establish the real cost. Once you establish the real cost, give the real amount, and eventually give a bit more to those that are willing to go in this very extreme area, especially workers. Or you can plan, in Finland they plan like a shorter jump in career. So if you enter, for instance, primary education in Finland, and you go to a very, very difficult area, your jump in career is faster. So it's considered that you do 1 year is like you do 3, okay? So you do this technique you can use that does not harm the others. You don't say, I don't give any more to, you know, yeah? But I try to recognize the difference. So that is the way to ensure that you will have offer there. So that if I talk, can you go in this area? They say, okay, I can, because I going to the end of the year, I'm not losing money because that's, you know, who goes there for? I mean, you can have a mission, you know, for it, but it's okay. At the end of the day, I have to leave. Okay, that's the things that you can do, and it's easy to do. I mean, it's easy. You need to have a more sophisticated technique of transfer. You need to have data, so to analyze in deep what. But you have data. That's the good advantage of what happened here. You have data at very granular level about cost, about coverage, so you can immediately see where the problems are. So you can solve it, this, I think. Even by not moving too much the budget. You see what I mean? You just reorganize the budget better. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me, you finish now. Muito bem. Com esta visão e com esta visão da Europa, trazida pelo Christian, lançamos as sementes para esta reflexão nacional. E principalmente, tendo em vista, e foi algo que também pudemos ouvir nesta comunicação, como é que, de alguma forma, o acesso mais generalizado à creche é uma realidade que o nosso país está a atravessar, mas o acesso, efetivamente, não é suficiente. Ter creche para todas as crianças não é suficiente. Há que investir em creche de elevada qualidade, há que investir no desenvolvimento profissional de todos os adultos que estão em creche e, portanto, todos nós temos esta missão e, como o Cristiano diz, pode ser difícil, mas nós conseguimos. Desta forma, vamos ter agora um momento de pausa, teremos uma pausa, só aqui olhar para o meu relógio. Portanto, regressamos às 11h15, 11h20, regressamos às 11h20. Há um bar, portanto, há um espaço onde podem tomar um café. Portanto, as colegas ali fora indicam da melhor forma. E até já. Obrigada.